Excellent. Our next speaker, our next segment is called From DAOs to Ecosystems, the next big trend in Web 3.0. And our next speaker is Giovanni. Is Giovanni ready? Giovanni, hello.
Hi,
Giovanni
Graham.
Lesna, who is the head of enterprise and partnerships at API3. Giovanni, over to you.
Hi, Graham. Thank you so much. And I think, just following on Neil's conversation about NFTs, it's obviously a very hot topic. I think, but in terms of what I'm going to be presenting today, I think that's also quite an interesting topic around, the new trends in decentralized autonomous organizations. So I think for today, hopefully leaving the session, you're going to leave it with more of an enlightened view around how this new kind of organizational structure is coming up. So it's basically a combination of economics 101, sociology and governance, and kind of technology subjects all in one. But my name is Gio Lesna, and I'm the head of enterprise and partnerships at API3. We generally work with your Fortune 2000 companies, assisting them navigate, Web3 when it comes to data oracles. In terms of the agenda, I'm going to go through the governance evolution, the birth of the decentralized autonomous organization, how API3 is a DAO and what that means, and then growth enabled by APIs, as well as just a general aerial view of what these blockchain ecosystems look like. So just to kind of get started, looking at Aragon, exponential growth over the last couple of centuries has actually been catalyzed by, new governance mechanisms that have basically resulted in these exponential growths that we've had throughout time. So if we're looking at, during the times of clans and tribes, the kind of organizational governance structure was a kinship-based one. If we're looking at, during the times of the Romans, they had a kind of army or subordination structure, command and control, as well as kind of the church when they came into power. So we can even look at, how Henry II delegated these kind of judicial decisions to local juries and how these hierarchical structures evolved. And then as we kind of moved on, we kind of saw the rise of corporations and trading companies, during kind of global expansion that led to competitive markets, and that resulted in different organizational structures evolving. But what was quite important was in 1937, Ronald Coase basically published The Nature of the Firm, and he won the Nobel Prize in economics in 1991 around the Coase theorem. And this basically hypothesized how, company structures emerged as this kind of coordination mechanism in order to internalize the productive relationships, eliminating costs of managing independent contractors. So in essence, bringing costs under one roof as an organizational structure and adding, more profitability to the firm. But if we kind of visualize what that looks like, the models that I've just explained, we can kind of see how we've moved into this multi-organizational network structure. So a little bit more complicated, and it's funny enough, it actually resembles a blockchain in itself. But we can kind of move over into how that evolved over time. So as we saw in the previous diagram, you can see how the mapping between principals and agents improved from a many to one relationship under, say, a monarchy regime into a productive many to few relationship. And that helped, modulate purchasing powers through elections and free market democracy. So we can even see that, these governance aspects have obviously had huge impacts on economics as well as our day-to-day lives. And that impacted states, organizations, and businesses. And they all evolved. So this became a kind of choice architecture where we abstracted millions of decisions away from the majority to the minority. And that's why we have politicians and representative democracies, as well as founders of companies or figureheads. And, such hierarchy allowed us to expedite human interactions due to the way that we organize. And that's where the word organization, in essence, comes from. If we fast forward to yesterday, we're basically taking a multi-organizational network. We're adding blockchain technology. we're adding smart contract functionality, we're adding the wisdoms of the crowd, so basically collective wisdoms, and we are architecting away the kernels of organizations. So these kind of siloed pockets. And what we end up getting is we spin up borderless companies, charities, and investment groups. And these borderless companies, known as DAOs, have secure treasuries, inclusive voting rights, full transparent audit trails, and no intermediaries. Thus, a DAO is born, and the future is here today. So, in other words, when we think about decentralized autonomous organizations as a new organizational structure, similar to as you would have a kind of corporation, these build on communities. So, building communities of meaning around economic collaboration is the primary form of a strategic competitive advantage that firms have. And I guess if we even extrapolate this out, we've seen the growth of the API economy because of bringing communities and bringing projects together through the connection of API technology. So I guess that's also even true for looking at APIs. So Web3 is definitely the next phase of governance. It's the next kind of evolution in the way that people are going to interact with each other to add value. But very interesting is these stats are taken by DeepDAO. So I have provided all the links within the presentation, and the presentation will be shared with the audience. I always believe in a nice takeaway that you can take home with you. You can kind of fall down the rabbit hole and learn a bit more around the topic. But interestingly enough, 11.3 billion is held on blockchains for DAOs in Treasury. There are about 4,832 DAOs out there, 1.7 million governance token holders that have actually have stakes in these entities, and there's over 54,000 decisions that are being made. And an excellent read is this Gnosis Guild. I highly recommend reading that. I obviously won't have time during this call to go through all of this, but for the bold, for those that want to understand how they can potentially work, moving away from centralized corporate structures to something that's more decentralized and exciting, I've provided some resources here. Definitely The Demise of the Firm, please read that one, and The Evolution of Organizations. Very, very interesting reads. And in terms of visualizing a DAO, I guess we need to kind of conceptualize this very abstract concept. So basically, it's a type of corporation that's built on top of a blockchain. Code is law. So the memorandum of incorporation is in essence built into the code. And the code defines the business model, it defines the operational parameters, and defines the payment terms of the DAO. And the DAO in its treasury on the blockchain, which anybody can see, has a treasury in a type of cryptocurrency or stablecoin. And the token of the DAO, in essence, represents a type of voting right that would represent the token ownership. If you have more token ownership, you have more say in the way the DAO is run. And that helps, managing the kind of voting process. And then how that works is we have kind of sub DAOs or contractor firms that interact with the main DAO and provide services, whether it's business development, whether it's technical skills, and they publish, in essence, proposals each quarter or half yearly to request funding. And obviously, if they're adding value, they get approved by the token holders. Looking at API 3 as a DAO, obviously moving towards this trustless governance model. On the left-hand image, we can see that API 3 as a DAO, in essence, the product that we are selling is a open source technology stack that allows Web2 API providers, completely at this conference, to monetize their data sets directly to Web3, and that is decentralized applications. But in order to do so, the open source technology is then governed by the API 3 DAO, where decentralized applications pay subscription fees to have access to data feeds and data products. The DAO pays the API providers for that, and then the stakers vote on corporate actions, in essence, within the DAO. And then moving towards the right-hand image, looking at this kind of a pyramid structure in place, and a node and spoke also diagram, is that API 3 obviously has these sub teams. So, you could be looking at integration developers, business developers, all working for the DAO all borderlessly. And API3 as a DAO has over 50 team members working in numerous locations across the globe. I think the only continent we do not have any team members on is Antarctica at this stage. So what is API3? As mentioned, it's a DAO. We started in 2018, where we raised quite a substantial amount from well-known venture capital investors, digital currency group, Placeholder, Pantera, Coin Fund. And we set out to innovate as we saw limitations in the current data oracle space. I'll also explain shortly what a data oracle is and why it's needed, and how Web2 fits into this. So we had this holistic view on connecting the supply and demand gaps, because there is a chicken and egg problem in blockchain that is needed in order to grow these ecosystems. So we've created an Ethereum virtual machine compatible solution, open source technology stack that is also blockchain agnostic and cloud agnostic, that just plugs and plays into your technology stack. But what is the actual problem? What is the problem that Web3 is experiencing, and what is that about? So that is known as the API connectivity problem, and it's also known as the smart contract connectivity problem. So if you're creating an application on a blockchain, you need to, the way that blockchains function and achieve their consensus is done very differently to how Web2 operates. So, there are solutions out there that are, solving this API web connectivity problem, but they're not doing it in a very efficient way. There are middlemans involved. It's an opaque model, and they're obviously taking cuts of the transactions. So what we've done is we've created a product called the Airnode, this open source building block technology that's, quick to set up, set and forget, free for API providers to deploy. They can then connect to a new marketplace in essence. And this is done as a first-party solution. So what that means is the technology is directly controlled by the provider, and in that way, all the opaqueness has been removed from the model. And it opens up also new use cases in terms of how we can monetize with fiat currency. So if you're an organization and you don't want to accept cryptocurrency, but you want to sell your data to Web3 and you have an API product, you can do that in a way where you get fiat as opposed to getting crypto, as some people don't want to have that on their balance sheet, and some countries don't allow that from an accounting perspective. And having it as a first-party solution also allows it to be GDPR compliant. That's the General Data Protection Regulation. So nothing is stored in the technology. It is a serverless Lambda function, and easy to deploy. And it's enterprise ready. So we basically, built this with transparency by design, but also building in whitelisting and blacklisting features for enterprises to still regain control of what data they sell, when they sell it, to whom, at what price. So now, how does an oracle work? What is a data oracle? So I have provided, as mentioned, some additional context for you guys to go and fall down the rabbit hole. What's the difference between first-party and third-party oracles, and how this mechanism differs from Web2. But I guess the key distilling points over here is that the first-party approach allows this kind of transparency, which is in essence the whole key of blockchain. So we actually, the blockchain has two very important functions. One is the blacklist. One is the encryption function. So without encryption, blockchain is useless. And the second is the data input function. So when we speak about data oracles, we're speaking about data input. Because if you input the wrong data onto a blockchain, whether it's an NFT, whether it's a land registry, or even the crypto pricing, that ends up having a ripple effect, and also basically degrades the whole point of the security. So with that said, removing third parties from the process is key in ensuring the data integrity is intact, but also giving enterprises the control over what data is made available, to whom, at what price, and when. Just re-emphasizing this point, because a current Web2 APIs cannot call blockchain applications directly or feed into them directly, you need a type of API gateway to sit in the middle that then translates that service so that smart contracts and dApps can ingest that data and function. And I thought what's nice is, since we have a traditional audience here at API Days, how does a Web2 differ to a Web3? So if we're looking, you have a smartphone, we have weather.com or AccuWeather, one of the well-known weather providers. they would then say, your app would say, what is the temperature in London? It would then call the IP address of the website. The website would then, return 10 degrees, right? So it's a very direct way of calling it. That's how Web 2 currently functions. But when we're thinking about Web 3, there is an abstraction layer needed for the API gateway to bring this data from the off-chain environment on-chain, so that the application, the DApp, decentralized application, can then ingest that data. So that's where the Airnode would fit in. Looking at the request response protocol and how it functions. So a DApp would ask for the temperature. It would go through the Airnode. The Airnode would then communicate with the Web2 API. It would then put that through and then rewrite the answer on chain, and the DApp would then consume that. And then with a data feed, it would basically be the Airnode product with an autonomous function known as a keeper or bot that would just check the on-chain price and update that continuously. And connecting Web3 and DAOs. So APIs are the glue of the internet. So real world data to DAOs, that's definitely where API 3 can assist. So any API provider that wants to provide their data sets or their services to DAOs would require, the Airnode to connect. Cross-chain connectivity, so different blockchains. DAO to DAOs would also communicate, and that's where APIs would fit in, and dApps to DAOs. I also just provided this for those interested in the Web3 ecosystem. So this is DeFi. I'm sure some of this was touched on by previous, presenters. But if you're interested in, looking at lending markets or at stable coins, you can kind of, fall down the rabbit hole and have a look at these different providers in the ecosystem. And then when it comes to DAOs, these are basically single-purpose organizations that have, a certain memorandum of incorporation that they need to do. So if we're looking at a very interesting one was Constitutional DAO. Constitutional DAO was a single purpose DAO that was created to actually end up purchasing the Constitution, the US Constitution that was published in 1787. They raised $47 million in cryptocurrency, and unfortunately Kenneth Griffith, the CEO of Citadel, outbid them and on the Sotheby's auction. But we can see that DAO was created. It had its governance and its process, and in essence, obviously all users within refunded. But the purpose of a DAO is a source of crowdsourcing towards a common collective purpose. And then I've also just put this slide. I'm sure the next presenter is going to be speaking about real world use cases on blockchain, just a little bit more around how blockchain technology is being used, from the energy sector, taxation, identification, mobile payments, insurance, and how that can basically function. And then just, from the API 3 perspective, we also work with Fortune 2000 companies. So if you are interested in exploring blockchain a little bit further, understanding how data oracles fit into your kind of roadmap, how you can either monetize your data or how the data can be inserted into smart contracts or decentralized applications, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you, explore those. And we do this at a $0 cost for proof of concepts and pilots through a kind of technical design and feasibility study. So we are here to help you navigate Web3 with API 3, and I'd be more than happy to take questions. If we can't get through all the questions now, feel free to send me an email, and I'd be happy to schedule some time and explore your use case and how we can get you connected to Web3. Thank you. Back to you, Graham.
Thanks very much, Gio. Questions for Gio. Question, do you think people are embracing the idea of DAOs? It's a bit of a new thing for some people. I know they've been around for a while, but do you find people embracing the idea? Are they a bit scared of it? Is it something that's difficult to grasp for people?
I think that's a very good question, because I think there is a bit of fear around the unknown. And I guess if you look at myself, working for a DAO, I worked at large corporations before joining API 3. There is a bit of question around how we are conditioned to do certain things in terms of labor legislations, in terms of how We expect certain feedback and how that works. But I do think there is slowly, as we're seeing the new generation, you know, embrace the way that decentralization, they're embracing a different work culture. I think COVID-19 also kind of exposed people more to accepting DAOs and being more digital and basically working cross-border. So I think the great thing is we're seeing a lot of freelancers working with DAOs, but I think as time goes by, we're going to start seeing this become a kind of organizational structure of choice, especially for the up and coming generation.
Yes, definitely. You do see that kind of thing happening more since COVID, as people have gotten used to not working in an office. And definitely, I know the team I'm working with is spread across, well, it's most of the country in Australia where I am. You just can't be with people present anymore. And I suppose the decentralized nature of the DAO also is attractive to people who are not used to working in more traditional companies.
Correct. And I think it's kind of that native digital, a digital native rather, approach where you can work from any country. You can, so as an example, if you like good weather and you like a lifestyle, you may want to work in Portugal but work for a company that's based out in the US or decentralized. Then you can get a bit of that kind of work-life balance. You can add value where you can, and you can potentially work for multiple DAOs. So you don't have to just work for one DAO, one job. You can do multiple tasks that you're good at, and it's basically a meritocracy orientated institution. So if you add value, you obviously need to be a self-starter. You need to have some initiative, and then you need to have the kind of grit to kind of push it through. Whereas I think with corporate culture, some corporate cultures, it's a bit sluggish. There's a lot of politics at play. And I think with DAOs, the beauty of it is there's also the discrimination is also like eliminated, because I'm working with cross-cultural teams, cross genders, etc. And it's just a beautiful way of knowing what needs to be done when. And this is also all facilitated by digital technology communication tools. So it's as if we're all in the same office, but we're just scattered all over the place.
What would you say are some of the challenges for people who want to throw in with a DAO or start their own DAO?
So definitely the challenges are that DAOs still need to have some type of corporate incorporation. So obviously, if you're also dealing, with maybe US citizens, you need to have a kind of corporate entity set up, because at the end of the day, taxation and regulation still comes into play. So I think that is one of the main factors. Also, finding the right talent is scarce. We can see that obviously developers are short. And I think it's all about building the community, right? If you don't have a community, which I'm sure you saw in the slides, the way that governance works is all around how communities come together, interact, and add value. So if you don't have a good community for the DAO, it's just bound to fail. And I think that is probably, the most difficult aspect is like ensuring that the community and the governance aspects are always engaged.
Yes, definitely. The community aspect is very interesting. It's very different from the corporate kind of life, although some corporates do tend to try and engender that community. But it's a bit different there with the DAO, when I guess more people have got skin in the game than just a few people at the top. Is that fair to say?
I think that's very true, and I think also the other difference is with DAOs. I think the incentives are also obviously quite high, because as you mentioned, there's a perceived risk of joining a DAO. So you end up getting, if you want to put inverted commas, it's kind of like share options in the form of cryptocurrency or the native governance token. And the longer you stay, the more that unlocks over periods of time. So the beauty of DAOs is always about aligning the short-term incentives to deliver, the medium term to keep people engaged, and the long term to keep people around. So there's an array of these incentives that we use, so that you don't have to be checking on people every day. You don't need to have a micromanagement strategy. People know what needs to be done. They know what their outcomes, like outcomes based, and I think that adds the most value. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Gio. Really appreciate your presentation, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Graham. I also appreciate it. And please let anyone that I haven't answered their questions reach out to me. I'm happy to take those questions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.